Hey guys, it's Kelsey, your best friend on the homestead from roughandtumblefarmhouse.com. Today we are talking sourdough bread. Now if you love sourdough bread but you just don't want to deal with all the stretch and folds and all the shaping and the resting in the fridge and all the extra stuff, you just want a straightforward, delicious sourdough sandwich loaf, this is the video for you. So like I said in the introduction, I just don't have time for sourdough. Like a lot of the time I have 3 little kids, I have a farm, I have a house, I have a YouTube channel and a blog. And so dealing with all the stretch and folds and all the extra stuff, it's more than I want to deal with. And I also still from time to time will have an occasion where I just get like a flat, not good looking loaf. And I also had like a special kind of thing, you know, for making my loaves and everything. And I really wanted a straightforward type of bread that was still sourdough, that still had a long ferment, that tasted delicious, but also just worked well for my family. We also found we had problems with, I love those artisan kind of round poofy loaves, they're beautiful, but unless you kind of eat the edges right away, you know, and almost kind of cut it into a square type shape, I found kind of the little wedge round sides, you know what I'm talking about? I ended up just getting wasted a lot of the time. I'd either feed them to the chickens, or if I was feeling industrious, I would chop them up and make breadcrumbs or croutons or something. But a lot of the times I just fed them to the chickens because I just didn't have time or didn't need, because we go through a lot of bread in this house, didn't need those little wedge pieces. So switching to a sandwich style loaf has really reduced the amount of bread we're wasting, and we eat pretty much the whole loaf. Every once in a while, like the ends we don't eat, and then again, breadcrumbs or croutons. But anyway, so hopefully I've got you convinced to make this bread, and now I'm going to show you how to do it. So first things first, we need to activate our sourdough starter. I have a few sourdough videos out there and some other resources that I will link to below in the description box and at the end of this video as well. So we want to activate your starter. And how I do that is the night before I plan to make this recipe, I take my starter out of the fridge and I feed it. I never measure or weigh or do anything. It's all just kind of by eye. So I just add a little water, a little flour, and leave the cap on loosely, though it's summertime now, so I'll probably cover it with like some cheesecloth or a paper towel or something so it can breathe, but so I'm not getting little fruit flies and stuff in there. So leave it on the counter overnight so that in the morning it's nice and bubbly, active, and ready to go. So first thing we want to do is mix up our recipe, and it's a very simple one for this. So you're going to use 200 grams of that active starter. Let me back up real quick. This recipe makes 2 loaves of bread because it just makes sense for me to make 2 loaves of bread at a time. So if you want this to just be a single loaf of bread, just cut everything I'm telling you in half. Okay, back at it. So 200 grams of your active starter. To that, we are going to add in 650 grams of water. I just use well water. I know some people say they may have issues if you're in town, if your water's been treated with like affecting your bread. I can't speak to that. I've always had well water pretty much my whole life, so I just use well water. And then to that, we are going to add 80 grams of honey. Now, I have made this recipe before using maple syrup instead of honey. I'll say it turns out delicious. It's got sort of a nuttier sort of flavor to it, I guess I would describe, and your loaf is going to turn out a little bit darker. At least that's what I have found from doing with maple syrup. So maple syrup or honey, use the same amount. Next, we are going to add in 4 tablespoons of melted butter, 20 grams of sea salt, 300 grams of whole wheat flour, and lastly, 750 grams of all-purpose flour. And we're going to mix this all up so all the flour is nice and wet. And this recipe is considered, I would say, a whole wheat recipe. The unfortunate thing is if you want a whole wheat recipe where it's mostly just all whole wheat, you're either going to get a really dense loaf or you have to use some sort of a dough conditioner. And that is because with whole wheat, it has to do with like the gluten, the microscopic gluten strands that are forming. The kind of jagged edges of a whole wheat actually will kind of slice those strands as they're forming. And so it just doesn't allow as much of a rise because the gluten gets cut off before it can do that, if that makes sense. So I've tinkered with this recipe a fair amount, and this is about as much whole wheat as I can get in this recipe and still have kind of a spongy, springy sandwich loaf like I want that holds together nice. So again, once we have all those ingredients in there, we're just going to mix it up really, really well so that everything is kind of wet and sticky. And then we're going to let it sit for an hour. So just cover it and then go about your business, let it sit. After that, we're going to come back and do our one and only stretch and fold, which is so nice that you're not doing this like every 20 minutes or 30 minutes like other recipes. It's just one stretch and fold. So you just, in this, when I filmed it, I think I was holding the camera. I wasn't set up, so it looks a little bit wonky, but so you just grab the one side and pull it up, pull it down over the other side, turn your bowl a little, grab the next section, pull up, stretch, set it down on the other side, and do it all the way till you make kind of a nice little shaped ball. Then we're gonna cover this bowl and we're gonna let it sit now for anywhere from like 4 to 5 hours. It's gonna kind of depend on how warm your house is. So in the winter, I will put this down on my wood stove and it actually has a really nice rise within about 3 hours. And kind of that weird in between time in the spring when it's not cold enough to use the wood stove, but the house is still fairly cool, like mid 60s, it's really not going to rise very well. So I would recommend putting it in the oven with the oven light on, or one thing that works great is if you have a heating pad, stick it on a heating pad, or even I've used a hot water bottle because I hate the idea of just having a heating pad plugged in all day. So I will take a hot water bottle and fill it up and then kind of balance the bowl, like tuck it in on there to help with a really good rise. I feel that's probably an issue that people have a lot of time with bread and with sourdough is you're not getting a good enough rise. That's why you have like a flat loaf. So make sure that this should roughly double, maybe a little less than double, before you're gonna wanna move on to the next step. So just kind of see what the temperature is in your house. So it feels nice and warm, it looks like you're getting some rise, just leave it be at room temperature. Otherwise you might need to add a little bit of warmth to it somehow. So after that second rise, we are going to be shaping our loaves into the pan. So you want to make sure that you grease your pans. I like to use coconut oil, and I also, I've got a bread pan review video as well, where I talk about this Lodge cast iron bread pan. I will never go back to any other sort of bread pan. The loaves come out easy every single time. I'm never like chiseling away at my loaves or scraping my pans trying to get them out. They come out so nice in these Lodge pans. I'll link them below. Use my Amazon affiliate link below so you can check these out. They're 20 bucks a pan. They're incredible. Get these pans. They're wonderful. So anyway, grease up the pans really well, and then we are going to very lightly dust the countertop with flour and take out your bread dough and split it in half. If you want to measure it, be real particular, go for it. I just kind of eyeball it. I usually end up with one loaf a little bit bigger than the other, but whatever, I'm not too worried about it. And then from there, we're going to do kind of the sourdough process you might be familiar with, where you just kind of stretch it out, kind of about as thin as you can go with it. And then we're gonna do the envelope sort of folds. We fold 1/2 down, 1/2 up, 1/2 over, and then 1/2 over. And now we're gonna kind of pull it taut. So this is kind of shaping your loaf. And so I just kind of go for a sort of a round ball, sort of a shape while I do this. And it's something you gotta kind of learn, where you bring it towards yourself and it kind of tucks under itself and pulls itself tight, if that makes sense. It's just something you got to kind of play with, and once you get it, you'll get it. Oh yeah, this is what she's talking about. And so from there, I just kind of stretch it out very minorly so that it's in more of like a roll type shape to fit the pan. And then I set them in our pan with the seam side down. So now we're going to let them rise again for about another 4 or 5 hours. So if you time this all out, it's best to start this process right away in the morning. And then usually by around supper time, you are baking your loaves, or sometimes if the rise has been kind of slow, I might be baking them, you know, like kind of right last thing before bed and pulling them out of the oven before I'm going to bed. And I just let them cool overnight. So you can definitely eat wonderful fresh bread the day you start this recipe in the evening, or it works out really nice that you got fresh bread waiting for you in the morning when you get up. So after that, we've got our loaf shape. They have risen. I like to have them rise so that they're just kind of cresting the top of the pan. And then from there, we are going to bake them. So you want to have your oven preheated to 375 degrees. And we're going to pop these in the oven and we're going to let them bake for 45 minutes. And then after that, we pull them out. And again, with breads, you want to take your breads out of the pan right away, or they're going to start to get soggy on the sides. Whereas like a cake or something, you want to kind of leave to cool in the pan. Bread, you want to take out right away. So we are going to get them out of the pans and let them cool before you slice into them. If you can, at least let them cool like 10-15 minutes before you slice them, but it's better to let them cool completely before you slice them. But I hardly ever do that, because what is better than like fresh hot bread out of the oven with melty butter all over it? It's so good. And so that is it. Now this bread, I usually make 2 loaves. We'll eat on one right away, so I usually just leave one out, and the other one I will slice up and toss in the freezer, and then we will take that out as well. So that is how you make a wonderful sourdough sandwich loaf that I consider technically more or less to be whole wheat. If you have any questions at all about the process, make sure you comment below. I will also link to my blog post where I will have it all step by step. So if there's anything here you're a little unsure about, just head on over to the blog and you'll be sure to figure that out. And make sure you check out, I will link some really great recipes here you might also want to try in your own farmhouse kitchen. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next week for more farming, family food, and fortitude here at our Rough and Tumble Farmhouse.